Hi, it's Adam from Zero Friction Cycling. Welcome to the land of low friction, and today it is going to be our first viewer Q&A from the videos up to episode 10. So that's where we're up to at the time of recording this one. So thank you for those that have taken the time to sort of put some comments on to the videos and ask some questions. So it's great to sort of see some initial engagement, and gives me a chance to ramble on to answer some of your questions to everyone who's watching, as opposed to just answering you in person on the comment. All right, so I'll just go through the ones that we've got in. So can you prepare a video about chain noise? It seems to me that the level of too noisy is very subjective to every person. But how does the sound correlate to chain wear and efficiency? Some guys redip every 300 miles, some do it every 100 miles. What dry sound is acceptable and what not? Thanks so much in advance. I cannot find any good info resources on that topic. So noisy is a bit of a tricky one, and it will be a little bit subjective. So I guess the kind of noise that you want to watch out for though, so especially I guess if, I think you're specifically talking about immersive waxing. So when a wax treatment is starting to run too thin, the chain will go from feeling and really overall sounding nice and silky smooth. You'll start to get a fairly distinctive, it's like a zzz, zzz, zzz sound. There'll be, I guess the chain will sort of start to vibrate a little bit on the pedal strokes under power. So it's a fairly distinctive feel and sound, and it should be pretty easy to pick up. And that's a sign that that wax treatment is really running down very thin. There are big benefits to not pushing the immersive wax treatments or wax lube treatments. So, because pretty much when you do an immersive re-wax, obviously the chain's going into this nice, bath of molten wax, and all the parts of the chain are then recoated in this super slippery solid wax. And if you were to re-wax basically we'd pick a really frequent thing. I have tested this. I re-waxed as a test on my road training bike every 100 kilometers. And after 5,000 kilometers of testing that chain, it was at 0.00 wear. Basically the chain metal just never gets a chance to come into play. So if you did that, you would pretty much have a chain for life. I recommend to re-wax earlier than what the manufacturers do, just because I'm super cautious against drivetrain wear. I just really obviously try to avoid drivetrain wear. Like all my lovely bits to last as long as possible, and it's going to be lower friction if everything's lasting as long as possible. So I tend to recommend for your molten speed wax and hot melt, even though they can go a lot longer and be still in a really good zone. I personally recommend around every 300 kilometers is great. And if you find that that's maybe a bit too frequent for you, then one of the best things to consider is simply running a couple of chains on rotation. So some people put that in the, man, that's crazy category, but especially if you're planning to keep that bike for a while, sooner or later, everyone's going to need to buy a new chain. So you're just pre-buying one chain basically. And especially if you're riding, like you're training pretty hard, or you ride in harsh conditions a fair bit, having a second chain to rotate through just makes things so much easier, and you're going to extend the life of your drivetrain, pretty massively versus, hammering one chain and possibly pushing treatment lifespans on occasion. So it basically just enables you. So for instance, we've got a lot of, sponsor a lot of local race teams and races that, they might be training 400, 500 Ks a week of pretty solid training. And for the races that have been running a 2-chain system or training chains, they run one chain from Monday to Friday, one for the weekend, and they just re-wax both at once on rest day. That keeps both chains still typically around that 200 to 250 kilometre mark before they re-wax. And I haven't had one yet where they've worn through both training chains before they've actually changed to a new bike, because avid racers tend to upgrade bikes every year or two. And no one yet has gone through 2 training chains on a 2-chain on rotation system, getting those chains to 0.5. So that's 2 years of no new chains, no new cassette, and no new chain rings. And they might do 20, 30,000 kilometers in that time. Previous to that system, if they did 30,000 kilometers, they typically would have been on, sort of 6 chains and somewhere between 3 and 6 cassettes. So pretty big difference in running costs and also hassle, just by one being on a top immersive wax like molten speed wax or hot melt, and 2, not pushing the wax treatments. So in general, we get typically the average you should be getting for most high quality chains is around 15,000 Ks on road if you're re-waxing by that 300 kilometre mark. And also if you're just simply changing to fresh wax somewhere around about every 10,000 kilometres. And that's pretty easy to keep on top of and pretty cheap. If you constantly push the wax treatments to about 500 to 600 kilometres, now I've really only got data, I guess, on the older, like pre-Silka hot melt and molten speed wax new formula days. Used to be that your chain lifespan might drop to somewhere around the 8,000 K mark, which is still impressive versus a lot of drip lubes, but not where we really want it in that nice 10 to 15,000 at least for if you're not pushing the wax treatment lifespans. The new formulas, though, both hot melt and molten speed wax are notably longer lasting than the old formulas, so there's probably more leeway on my typical recommendations of 300K, but that's just, been, I guess, from a lot of long-term data, the general recommendation. Now, rambled on there, but back to the noise part. Now, your actual drivetrain, everyone's drivetrain is going to vary a little bit. You might have, some chains are noisier than others, some cassettes are noisier than others, and some jockey wheels are noisier than others. But overall, you shouldn't actually be able to notice it when you're riding along. If you can notice it and it's annoying you, then it's probably too noisy and maybe something needs to be looked at. When people maybe most notice the switch to immersive waxing, that can be when it's, I guess, everything's brand new. So you've got, I guess, now a solid lubricant on covering across metal parts, and especially if what you've been used to previously, if you've been used to a very dampening lube, so a very like a decently viscous wet lubricant or a wax emulsion lubricant, they can be quite dampening, and moving to a solid lubricant can feel different, but it shouldn't feel offensively so. And then over the first few waxings, what you'll get is some excess wax imparted from the chain onto your cassette teeth, onto your chainring teeth, and things will soften up a little bit. And you can speed that up just by, especially at the start, just re-wax early the first sort of 3 to 5 times. Just re-wax at 150K, somewhere around like that. And you'll get some excess wax imparted onto your cassette teeth and chainring teeth. Everything will soften up and just sort of take a little bit. Some people feel a little bit of harshness when they do that first switch. So that's pretty much that, really. So noise is subjective. There's no real too noisy. Some people are very sensitive, some not. But the particular, that zzz dry sound that's indicative of when your wax treatment on your chain is pretty much done, that's really the main one you want to look out for and make sure then you re-wax next opportunity. Noise, no real guide, unfortunately, I can give you there, but hopefully my ramblings helped a little bit. All right, now I know how to look after my chain. How should I clean and prep my chainring and cassette after each ride? You know the drill: after dry rides, dusty rides, muddy wet rides, and so on. Okay, with a wax chain, and I hope the question is for a wax chain, really there's not really anything. I'd never clean my wax cassette or wax chainrings. You do get a little bit of wax build up, so they don't look mint brand new all the time, but they look still very good. They look a lot better than what you get with the vast majority of drip lubes, especially your wet lubes where things go black. The reason why I don't clean the wax on my cassettes is because the wax, unlike say a build-up of a wet lube where it's going to get abrasive and gritty, the build-up of wax is actually very wear protective. So it's just going to help protect your teeth and on your cassette and chainring if they've got a wax coating on them, as opposed to things being metal on metal. So if you've been on a really dusty ride and there's a lot of surface dust on your cassette, then sure. Again, it's just water. You just wash it off with water and dry it, and you're good. And same with chainrings and muddy wet rides. So the only time I actually take a hose to my bike is after a full, a proper decent wet ride, mud ride. And so again, if you ride in the mud with, let's say, your typical drip lube chain and lubricant, you've got quite a cleaning job ahead. With a wax chain, whatever mud sticks to your cassette, it's just sticking to the metal of the cassette, and the mud will just wash off with water. You don't need any solvents, you don't need any cleaning agents. It just washes off, and you're left with just a nice, beautiful, clean cassette again. So it's really super easy. So for road riding, there's none. Dusty riding, quick rinse off, and muddy riding, it's a quick rinse off just with water. It's super easy. So yeah, if that was pertaining to wax, that's pretty much that. Doesn't the chain rust when hanged after the boiling water bath? Or you let them dry quickly and wax within a couple of hours? Also, would you apply true tension on top of a hot wax chain if there is no possibility to re-wax in the field? So generally, yeah, if you've been riding in the wet and you've done a boiling water flush rinse to prevent bringing a whole bunch of stuff into your wax pot before you re-wax it, then the chain won't rust like immediately. So if you've done a boiling water rinse, the boiling water will actually dry off relatively quickly as opposed to cold water, and you can hang that for an overnight set normally and you'll be okay. Make sure, like if it's sort of seen obviously salted roads and things like that, really obviously you want to make sure you've done a good few boiling water rinses so there's no salt left. If it's been a salted roads, I'd probably make sure that after I've done the rinse, I personally, just because I find it easy, is I take it out of the boiling water, I blast it with a hairdryer or a heat gun for like 2 minutes, pop it on the wax, turn the wax on. A lot of people actually skip the drying altogether and just stick it on the wax pot and turn the pot on. It doesn't ever have appeared to cause any issues. It seems like the water just evaporates out of the wax, it just bubbles out. The paraffin doesn't evaporate, but the water does. So you can do that as well if you're worried about it. But aside from that, normal, if it's not salted roads, you can hang it for like an overnight set or at least a good few hours. They're not going to rust super fast. Salted roads though, they can. You don't want to leave your rollers unprotected after they've been wet and salted. And the true tension, yeah, absolutely. So true tension, either the true tension tungsten race or the true tension tungsten all-weather lubricants, great lubricants. Race has got a really super short lifespan, but it's very good for when it lasts. If you've got a short events, it's super. It's probably the cleanest lubricant on the market. The all-weather is a great lubricant to use with the immersive waxing because you can just use that. A bit like the Silka Super Secret Drip and UFO, you can use that with in conjunction with immersive waxing and use that as a top-up and then just re-wax. You don't need to clean that product off before you do a re-wax. It's compatible with the wax that's in the wax bath. So that's that one. So how do you clean the rest of the drivetrain? It's a bit harder to do it off bike. Sorry, some of the questions might be worded funny. I've just purchased a bottle of UFO Clean and I'm thinking that the only practical way is to spray it onto the drivetrain with the chain off, of course. Go hard with a stiff brush. Is that what you recommend? So again, this one's without, I can't see the context of whether or not it was pertaining to waxing or just initial, if you're cleaning up the drivetrain for waxing. I'm going to assume that it's actually cleaning up the drivetrain for waxing and say that, yeah, if you've got a oily sort of cassette and chain ring and you're going to be putting a new wax chain on there that you don't want to get that contaminated, UFO Clean is great to clean up your existing drivetrain. You probably won't need a stiff brush unless what you were using before was a pretty, sort of hard set lubricant, of which there are some out there. Some of the wax emulsion lubricants, they do set really hard and can need a stiff brush to get off. When wax sets like concrete, so you'll probably need a brush or a Dremel or a jackhammer. And if it is pertaining to wax, then yeah, again, wax, like clean the wax, excess wax off the cassette. I just use boiling water as opposed to any sort of chemical. I don't see the need to go to a chemical, especially one that costs you sort of $50 a bottle. Just melt it off with boiling water. Otherwise, you can just, if it's wax and you do want to clean it off, the stiff brush will actually brush it off without needing to do any solvent. If you've got a stiff wire brush, you can just have at it on the cassette and it will brush the wax off. And you can finish, if you want it back to absolute mint, then after you've brushed the initial excess wax off with a stiff brush, boiling water and gloves for protection from the heat, and clean it up with a microfiber cloth and you'll get it back to brand new. So yeah, that's pretty much that. But overall though, the only, really with the cassette, the only cleaning or the only maintenance you need to do with the wax chain is between the two smallest cogs. So basically the 11 and 12 tooth, because of there's, I guess, the channel between those two cogs is right near the bottom where the chain sits. And over time you can get a build-up of wax in that channel, meaning that over time the chain can sit a little bit high in the 11-tooth cog, and if it sits too high it will jump under power. So every sort of typically 2,000-3,000 Ks, it's like a 10-second job of, say, a toothpick or the end of a paper clip, and you just clear out the wax from between the 11 and 12th tooth cogs. That's it. That's your chain ring and cassette maintenance if you're on wax. Personally, I don't do anything else because it makes everything else last longer if the wax is left on there. Wondering what is the cheapest and best way to recycle the chemicals? Thanks. All right, so if you're just cleaning at home, all you need to do, so let's say you're cleaning your new chain following the Wax End Master Guide. You do bath 1 with the mineral terps. So your 15-minute soak, agitate it, pour it out into a container for disposal, and then bath 2 and bath 3. For most chains, if you've got SRAM chains, you'll be doing bath 4 and bath 5. Now, the baths basically from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, you can pour them into a separate container, and you can keep those aside for using for bath 1 and possibly even bath 1 and 2 of your next chain, depending on what the chain is. The heavily contaminated with factory grease solvent, though, that's in the other bottle. Most people, you don't need to dispose of it often. For a lot of people, it's like maybe once every year or 2 or 3 that if you've kept that somewhere safe, it's literally just doing a run to your local, your particular council's hazardous liquid waste disposal. So in South Australia, we've got one that's basically up at Dry Creek. It runs once a month, and yeah, it's a pain in the butt. You got to stay in the line there for a while, but it's not too much of a pain in the butt if it's something you only have to do every sort of couple of years. And the same with the methylated spirits that you use to finish it off. Although methylated spirits is really, really low toxicity. It's basically just alcohol. If there's anything that you sort of feel pretty safe about using as to kill a weed, then methylated spirits, you're okay. And you're only cleaning off a film. It's not heavily contaminated with something that you cleaned off the bike. So just don't pour it down a drain or something like that that's going to get into the waterway. But yeah, being super good, then properly dispose of your methylated spirits as well via the same method. Just for exhibits A and B, so things are different for me because obviously I do a lot of chains. We're on track for over 3,000 pre-prep chains this year, which for a little one-man band operation like mine, with everything else that we sort of do as part of ZSC, we're sort of fairly pumping along on pre-prep chains, which is groovy fun. So I go through a fair bit of solvent, and but I don't actually have to buy much new solvent. So I use this to recycle. This is just an alcohol distiller. This one I use for recycling the methylated spirits. This one's not bad in that it's really methylated spirits. You have evaporation much more easily that you can lose the product. This one I use for the mineral terps. So I go through more mineral terps obviously than the methylated spirits. So I've got a bigger one, and yeah, I just pour the terps in here. It evaporates. You've got your cooling water here, and pour in greasy terps and get out nice, beautiful, clean terps. And then I've just got a little bit of sludge left at the bottom, and that goes into a bottle. And, oops, sorry, that was done well. And then that gets filled up very slowly over a period of a few years. So that's me, but I'm doing 3,000 plus chains per year. So it's not really viable for average players at home. And yeah, and obviously it costs, we've got sort of solar power to burn here because we've got a nice big solar system, so I can do it during the day at no cost from an energy perspective. Again, you wouldn't really go down this path as a private person unless you were prepping an enormous number of chains. And there's other little traps like the methylated spirits vapors are not kind to gaskets, so you have to get a particular gasket and maintain them and all that. So don't worry about doing that at home, but that's what I do at Zero Friction Cycling. I don't have to go through a lot, and thankfully I don't have to dispose a lot, and saves a fortune. That's a big part of why I can offer pre-prep prices a lot cheaper than basically anywhere else in the world, is that sort of boutique operation, and I've got a system dial that I can recycle my solvents in-house really easily and really cost effectively. So all right, I am using Silka hot wax and the liquid version to top up. In between hot waxing, I tend to just hose down the chain on bike, and after it dries, I reapply the liquid wax on top of it. rather than use the alcohol and microfiber wipe down method? Do you have an opinion? And maybe, am I maybe removing too much wax by hosing it down, or counterintuitively making the dirt stick more to the chain? Cool, so this is going back to a little bit to, I think the maintenance basic level 1 episode, I think it was about episode 3 maybe, where I demonstrated that really if you're sort of running, I guess, really either wax or other lubricant, before you re-lubricate if you've ridden off-road, then you should wipe the surface dust off the chain first. One, get rid of the surface dust if you're re-waxing so you don't bring that dust into the pot. Two, if you're just going to be applying a lubricant, what you don't want, so dusters, even if you're running a solid lube chain like an immersive wax chain or a chain coating lubricant like UFO or SS drip, some dust is going to stick to the outside of the chain from static electricity because the chain's whizzing through the air. It's a bit like dust sticks to your bike frame when you ride off-road and you haven't lubricated your frame, some will stick. And what you don't want to do if you're just applying lubricant over the top is you don't want to have the lubricant then bring that dust from outside the chain, deep inside the chain with the lubricant, where it's obviously going to then cause abrasive wear. So I demonstrated just like a really easy way to prevent that is just to spray a bit of methylated spirits or similar onto a microfiber cloth, wipe the chain, and that will lift off the surface dust. Then you can wipe the chain with the dry part of the cloth and then you re-lube, and that saves that, or you move it to the wax pot. So is it okay just to hose it down? Honestly, that's fine. If you've got a wax chain or a chain coating lube like Silk SS Drip, then like the cold water is not going to do anything to the wax. The cold water will not melt off or dissolve off any of the wax at all. So you're not going to have to worry about that. Just dry it, obviously, before you then put your lubricant on top. If you're applying a drip lubricant on top, you wouldn't want to do that over the top of a wet chain because, yeah, it may obviously cause issues with that lubricant being able to adhere to the chain if it's trying to mix with water. So you're not going to make more dirt stick to it if you're hosing it off, especially if you're running a good lubricant. It's good, I've got nice wet notes now, thanks to I'm so graceful. All right. See if it causes the ink to run. Okay, this one's worded a little bit confusingly. Bear with me here. All right. One question was popping up when I saw your recent video. In your review guide to AB Graphene Lube, you mentioned the need to UFO clean and kettle for smooth squirt and AB graphene. Later, you stated that you can re-wax immersive chains that have been topped up with AB Graphene Lube because AB confirmed that you can re-wax with MSW hot melt straight over. Just to get it right, you don't UFO clean and kettle when re-wax immersive with MSW hot melt when graphene lube was on, but in any case when smooth squirt was on the chain. So that might have been like me typing in a hurry. Okay, so yeah, I think what happened was at one stage my information was that for lubricants such as smooth squirt and also Absolute Black's graphene lube that you need to use at least sort of UFO clean on top of any boiling water flush rinses before you do an immersive re-wax. Smooth and squirt are a different type of wax altogether really than your immersive wax bases, and they don't just sort of melt off nicely with boiling water. But then I did get some information in directly from Absolute Black that graphene lube is fully compatible to just immersively re-wax without having to clean it off at all. You can re-wax straight over the top like you can with Silk SS Drip and like you can with UFO Drip. And so it could have been that I was a bit slack myself in updating the information on one of the parts versus the other. So apologies if confusing there. So yeah, Absolute Black have put forward the information themselves that yes, it's fine to just re-wax straight over the top of their graphene lube. You don't need to clean it off, same as we can with SS Drip and UFO. But yeah, squirt and smooth, and another lubricant similar to that out now, which is Grax. Those they have a completely different wax base, and they will not just melt off with boiling water. So hopefully that makes sense. Asking from a sustainability side, is carbon belt drive a good idea? That's a good one. I don't know. I would imagine yes. It will possibly take more a few more resources to manufacture a carbon belt drive versus a chain, cassette and chain rings. Don't know that categorically because some cassettes are quite intensive as well as, and some chain rings are as well in terms of their manufacture. But they should last a very, very long time, and they don't need any lubricant cleaning and so on. So provided they last a very long time, and obviously they're pretty light on or no maintenance, then long term they're probably going to outlast or have a lower carbon emission versus traditional chain and so on. But again, belt drives are much less efficient than chains, so they're great for commuting, especially all-weather commuting. They're not going to really rock your sort of road race bike or any kind of bike that you want to zoom along on. That's why they're just not really very wide adoption. Would you recommend your choice of branded chain waxes over the 500 gram of fully refined paraffin wax in brackets Kera Wax 422 and 50 grams of virgin PTFE Teflon powder 1.6 micron mix that's available and rated as a cheaper alternative? All right, I think this mix is the one from OzCycle. That's the only one I know of that has recommended 50 grams of PTFE to go with 500 grams of wax. 50 grams of PTFE per 500 grams of wax is nuts. That's a mental amount of PTFE. I have no idea how that figure was arrived at, and it's extraordinarily wasteful. So hot melt has no PTFE, and obviously a lot of places are trying to move away from PTFE because whilst PTFE in itself is inert, and so it's not necessarily directly toxic, it can be toxic in some circumstances, but not just through contact or ingestion. But the manufacture of it's quite toxic, so a lot of companies are trying to move away from that. Molten speed wax, they used to be at 5 grams per 500 grams, and that has trended down now to, I believe the latest formula has moved it from 1 gram that they were at down to 0. Where 50 grams would have come from, I have no idea at all. Honestly, I think a lot of that information, it's just, let's just be safe. We know that some PTFE has to be in there. I don't want to possibly fall up short and not have a good mix, so I'm going to recommend to my viewers pile in 50 grams and have that base covered. That's about the only logical explanation I have for such an amount to be recommended. It's not based on any, obviously, testing and any data and any investigation as to what is typically used. So I would say please don't use 50 grams of PTFE. And whether or not the branded waxes are better than, say, the fully refined paraffin wax, look, there's no contest. It is not as easy. The waxes by Molten Speed Wax and Hot Melt, they're amazing. It is not as easy as just getting some food grade wax or canning wax or whatnot and banging some stuff into it. If it was, everyone would have made a wonderful super wax a long time ago and been cashing in. I guess an example of this is where, so if we look at, say, the Absolute Black Graphene Wax, to me, where that fell over was that it was too soft. It just showed really high wear right from the start. So if a wax is too soft, it's going to not be able to, keep the metal away from the metal, and you'll get some pretty high wear. If the wax is too brittle, then it's, too hard, then it's too brittle, it chips off. It's got very poor lifespan, and again, you're going to have not a great experience. So the wax base that they use in your MSW and hot melt, these are really high-tech stuff. So it's not just a one wax base. It is a blend of some, obviously it's a sort of paraffin base, but there are so many grades of paraffin, not just in terms of impurities, but also in terms of how soft or hard it is. And it's a blend of obviously the exact right kind of paraffin, as well as some other waxes in their base to get something that is super low friction, but also not going to be too brittle and not going to be too soft. Getting that Goldilocks zone is extremely difficult. And even we've seen, say, even with Molten Speed Wax, how much it's improved from, say, the original formula now to the new formula. So super smart people work for a very long time doing pretty objective testing on this for a long time to get to the base blends that they get. And if your base is crap, doesn't matter what you add to it. If the base is average or crap, it's just putting lipstick on a pig. You can put tungsten disulfide or moly or PTFE or whatever you like into it, if the base is crap, the lube will be crap. The friction modifiers that they add in are to take what is here to here. They are playing with the fractions of a watt to try to be the fastest possible. So yeah, in short, you will not come within the ballpark, not even in the same state as what the ballpark's in with any DIY wax versus the top waxes. And yeah, there's 50 grams of PTFE. If we can please not anyone do that, that would be amazing. Is it an option to immerse in drip wax? Yes, this is probably the closest. I gather that's what you mean by drip wax, it being a chain coating type lubricant. So drip, probably one of the top drip waxes is Silka SS Drip. They have a tub, and this is a super handy little thing in that for some people this is kind of the great middle ground between an immersive hot melt wax and just dripping more lubricant on the chain. Some people, you know, and everyone's different, I can understand it. For some people, melting wax in a pot, having a slow cooker, it's a bridge too far. Cool. So we've sort of covered off in other videos obviously the advantages of a hot melt wax and, you know, flushing out the old coating and recoating in the new one. If you can't hot melt wax, your next best bet is to put it into a tub of awesome lubricant. So you can pop your chain off, simply put it into this tub, give it a nice soak. You want to give it a long soak because you want the old coating, whatever sort of maybe left there, give it time to get soaked in the tub. And you know, sort of the carrier in this should work on the coating that's left behind. And then after you've given it a good soak, I would give them a good soak for a couple of hours. Swish the bejesus out of it and then remove it, wipe off all the excess, give it an overnight set, and you will have done a great reset again. Even if you don't sort of soak it and so on, even if you were to put it in, swish it and do that, you're still going to get overall a better outcome versus just dripping some more lubricant on. Most wax lubricants, wax type lubricants, you are literally usually only applying about 5 mil. It's more common for the wax types as opposed to some high volume wet lube types like say Rock and Roll Gold. So if you're putting 5 mil on over 100 plus links of chain, that's 0.05 of a mil per link, half of which is carrier. So you've got 0.025 of a mil of fresh lubricant going on to, you know, per link of the chain. There's only so much that can flush clean whatever contamination may be in the chain from riding around. Putting it into a tub of hundreds of mil of lubricant and shaking it around, you're obviously going to get a vastly better flush clean. Yes, over time, you know, the lubricant in the tub's going to be less amazing than when it's new because each re-immersion is going to bring in some contamination with it. But you can imagine that obviously how long will it take for the contamination in here to start to get to be a poor ratio when I've got 300 odd mil versus adding 0.025 mil of lubricant per link to my chain. So the ratio to contamination is going to be obviously a lot less for a lot longer using any kind of immersive relube method versus just adding stuff on top of the old coating. So that's a top option there. You can, if you don't want to go that path, but you've got another top lubricant, buy a 500 ml screw top container from your local supermarket, pour some bottles in, and you will be golden. My question is, the Shimano TL-CN42 chain indicator okay to use on Campagnolo or SRAM chains? So bicycle chains are what's known as half-inch pitch chains. That means there is a half-inch distance between each pin. And so that is a standard across all bicycle chains. So the chain wear checkers are basically fine to use across all bicycle chains, regardless pretty much of speed and also regardless of brand. So the only real outlier to that is the SRAM Axis road chains. They use an oversized roller. So checkers that obviously pretty much all of them drop in between the rollers, and when you've got a chain with an oversized roller, then that's sort of going to throw those out. So I don't actually have on hand what is the recommended chain checker for an Axis road chain. I think there is one out there. I've got to actually chase that up. But yeah, for basically everything other than Axis road, any SRAM, Campy, Shimano, Whipperman, whatever it may be, your TLCN 42 chain checker will be perfectly fine, and that's the one that I recommend. Access Road at the moment, yeah, have a look at the chain check video, and that will demonstrate how to use digital calipers as well, if that's not a don't have a tool. All right, any thoughts, so same vein, any thoughts on Whipperman Connect's chain wear checker? I've had it for ages and I can't remember why it was recommended at the time. And curious that Dave Rome doesn't rate the TLCN 42, which is one that I recommend in general. So yeah, I don't know, sorry about the Whipperman Connect's chain wear checker. I have checked a bunch of the, I guess the more common ones that are available in Australia, but there are so many out there. Yeah, so without sort of seeing it, I don't know if it could be great, might be okay, might be a little bit hit and miss. In general though, any of the chain wear checkers that either have the dial, so some have a dial on them where you insert a pin on one end and you turn a dial to get the pin to touch the other end. Most of those tend to be pretty terrible. There's just not the manufacturer tolerances for them. Every 0.1 mil when measuring those spans really counts, and they just tend to be all over the place. Similar with, I guess, tools that are, say, cast and then finished, as opposed to being laser cut. So, for instance, I think they may have changed, but the previous model Park tool used to be a cast and finish, and again, I just saw a lot of variance with those over the years, and same with other tools like Topeak, Bursman, a whole bunch of those. They just can really vary from one tool to another. The Shimano chain checker, it's laser cut, it's short, strong steel, and it's just every single tool is exactly the same. 0.5 is 0.5. Why doesn't Dave Rome recommend that? If we go back to, so Dave Rome, for those that don't know, he's the Australia's sort of head tech writer for Cycling Tips. Super knowledgeable tech guy in cycling and also on tools. We're very lucky to have such a tech writer, yeah, for one of the top media magazines. So a bit of a deep dive ages ago on chain wear checking. So and I do agree with Dave, I guess David on the same page here, that roller wear on a chain is still wear. Rollers wearing will still impact a chain's efficiency over time. And so if you've got a chain that might be still within its 0.5 elongation wear, when we use either, say, digital caliper just to check the elongation only component, or if you've got a chain wear checker that isolates out the roller wear, which the Shimano tool does, then you can get a chain wear measure that is say under 0.5, but if you've got rollers flopping around all over on the chain because the rollers are really worn, then the chain's not going to be amazing in terms of its efficiency. So officially, so the Shimano tool does isolate out the roller wear. So it's kind of, I agree that that's not optimal in terms of, yes, roller wear should count in the wear measure, but in general, the reason why I recommend it is just because it's, I guess, the only sort of drop-in checker that it's just a super easy, simple drop-in checker, and every single time, every tool is exactly the same. So when a customer says my chain is at, you know, X amount wear, and I'm using this chain checker, I know it's, you know, it's a really accurate measure for that particular measurement. Yes, it might not be counting roller wear, but really for the intents and purposes of when do I need to know when I should replace my chain, that one is perfectly, I guess, a perfectly great tool just to simply know, go, no go, my chain is good or it should be replaced. So if I come across a tool that's a really simple drop-in checker and it also takes into account roller wear, and it's one that I can sort of be 100% on that every single one is going to be dead on accurate every time, I'll probably update the recommendations. But for the moment, that's still my go-to. But that's why I think, that's my guess anyway, without directly asking that question again to Dave. It was a couple of years ago that we sort of did a deep dive on chain wear. I'm pretty sure that's the answer as to why he doesn't tend to recommend chain wear checkers that isolate out roller wear. How do you make sure the chain is really clean if using different chemicals? So clean from factory grease and clean the film left by the solvent. That UFO clean looks really impressive. If I understood you correctly, you only need one bath of it and the chain is clean. So it cleans better and less toxic than mineral terps, just more expensive. Yeah, good question. Really the only way that you'll really know if you've got the chain properly clean if you move into waxing is after you've done your immersive wax, are things most awesome as they should be, or does your chain go really, really dry and noisy very, very quickly, which would indicate that the wax is not bonded to the chain, and that would mean that, you know, a film has been left behind and it hasn't been able to bond, or some obviously factory grease has been left behind. If you follow the instructions though, either for UFO clean, especially if you're doing off bike, the UFO clean does show on their video an on bike clean, and I've spoken to Ceramic Speed about that, and they assure me that that works brilliantly as they show on the video. I'm personally just hesitant re on bike cleans, so I would still go off bike. Apologies if you can hear a dog barking in the background. We have a guardian of the galaxy that takes her guarding of our home here very seriously. So yeah, so I would still recommend, if using UFO, then off bike personally. Yeah, it is a brilliant product. It just does cost more. However, again, mineral terps and methylated spirits, as I covered on the other one, it is really, really easy to make sure that they are properly disposed of. So you can save a bomb still just by using mineral terps and methylated spirits, or the equivalent of what that may be in your particular country. So again, if unsure, if Google can't help guide you as to what the equivalent is in your country, duck to your hardware store and, you know, take basically Google with mineral terps, show that to the hardware store person, and same for the methylated spirits, and ask them what is the equivalent of that in your country, and they should be able to help you. So yeah, so personally, like, UFO cleaner is great. It is a biodegradable cleaner and solvent, but just remember, even though it is, what you're cleaning off the bike, if it's a factory grease chain, that isn't. So what you're going to be left with after you've cleaned it isn't any, you know, it's no longer 100% biodegradable, because you've cleaned a product off with it that isn't. So you're still going to want to dispose of that UFO clean that has now done the degreasing of your chain, you know, responsibly. So they're kind of almost going to wash out a little bit on that front. So yeah, but and the other thing is, well, if you've used a solvent, either mineral terps or the UFO clean, UFO clean officially doesn't need the methylated spirits afterwards, but in general I still do. And if you're using the methylated spirits for a couple of baths after you have done the solvent clean, it should be extraordinarily rare that you would ever have a film of anything left behind. The only time you're going to have a film left behind is if you've done a really terrible clean of the factory grease with something that wasn't very good at cleaning factory grease. So if you just did, you know, one quick bath of diesel and then did a couple of rounds of methylated spirits, you're probably going to have some stuff left behind. So, but if you follow the guide, you will be fine. Hopefully that one answered that one for you. Right, this is just general comment. Comments in the waxing FAQ video was too long. Yes, it was. So the waxing FAQ video was nuts long. So is the document. And trust me, they're just the frequently asked questions. So apologies for that. I couldn't break up the video. Sorry, there'd be some background chatter of little ones out there. I couldn't break up the... Huh? Can't hear it? Cool. So I wasn't sure if there was going to be some interrupting noises for our thing here. Yeah, I couldn't break up the video because if somebody asked me a question, then I wouldn't know which video to send them to, because I won't be able to remember if I split up into 4 videos, which question's in which one. If I get a question about immersive waxing, these days I have to send people to the Wax Ed Master Guide and the FAQ guide or video as their first reference, just because I get so many from all around the world. If I answered all of the questions I get on immersive waxing, that's all I do all day, every day. So I sort of had to try to just cover it off, and unfortunately, I just had to bundle it all into a big document and bundle it all into a video to cover it. And yeah, so apologies if it's long. If it helps, I listen to a lot of really long podcasts on all sorts of nerdy stuff. So some podcasts and things I listen to can have episodes up to 4 hours long. And same with YouTube, I watch a lot of really cool stuff by you know, like people like Sandy Munro with deep dives into a whole bunch of things, and lots of videos like that. So it makes my, although I don't actually watch the video at the time because I just listen to it, but it makes housework, so mopping, vacuuming, watering the garden, lawn mowing, all that stuff. It used to be really boring 15 years ago, it's now great times because I get to catch up and keep learning lots of really cool stuff on lots of topics. So I listen to really long episodes on everything you can think of all the time. So yeah, if you need something to help fill in your vacuuming time and dishwashing or whatever it may be, waxing FAQ, you'll be able to pile through that. So, but a quick note on that as well though, most like this, it is a bit nuts long. Most of the FAQs, probably I'd say 75% of the FAQs are overcomplicating waxing. For my waxing, I pop the chain off, I put it on a swisher, I stick it on the pot, I turn the pot on low, I come back sometime later and swish it, I hang it to set, before the next ride I break the wax link bond and I reinstall the chain. That's basically it. So if it's getting much more complicated than that, then you're probably overcomplicating waxing. It should be basically that easy. The only question is that you may have around that is just, I guess, staying on top of your, when you change to a fresh master link. That's pretty much should be about it. So yeah, hopefully that helps there. Sorry for the length of the video. There'll be the odd long one here and there. I will actually try and make some short ones. I can't promise, not my forte, but we'll try. All right, last one. Does it matter what temperature you take your chain out of the wax? So I've tried all sorts, trying to establish if it helps to let it cool and hold more wax in the chain. I've gone back to hot as I think that it all ends up flying out. So by letting it cool, so it just ends up with a lot more mess that needs to be brushed off and has no value, just a waste. Any thoughts on this one? Yes, correct. So I actually think that's in the FAQ guide. So yeah, there is a video out there. Again, I think that was an OzCycle one where it shows him standing by the wax pot with a thermometer, waiting for it to cool down to basically near 6 degrees, which is near the wax set temp. And that one, I think he actually removes it and sticks it in a tub of cold water to lock in as much wax as possible. If you lock in as much wax as possible, you're just going to get a whole bunch more wax come out when you actually start pedaling the bike. So when you first pedal the chain in, be it on your bike stand, inside or whatnot, you're just going to get a ton of excess wax come out. And yeah, you're just going to get a lot more excess wax come out as you sort of start riding down the road. Again, the pressures inside your chain are enormous from your rider load because the chain parts are quite small. You're going to pretty quickly, get up to some, it can be into the thousands of PSI. So very quickly, so after about 10 minutes, you're going to have the same amount of wax in your chain if you have removed it at 90 degrees or thereabouts and hang it to set on a 40-degree day as if you remove it at 60 degrees and put it in a tub of water. You're going to be in the same place 10 minutes down the road. So you're just going to have a lot more mess and a lot more waste of wax with the cold method for the extra hassle of doing so. So yeah, just for your rewaxing in general, anywhere between basically 70 and 100 degrees, you are golden. You will get a perfect rewax by rewaxing at that, anywhere in that pretty big target temperature range. You don't need a thermometer. Your slow cooker on low, you're going to be in that range. You're going to be perfectly fine. As long as you can swish it and the wax is clearly nicely viscous or very thin, it'll be almost like a water-like consistency anywhere above about 70 degrees. You'll be able to swish it, remove it, let the excess drip, hang it to set, and that's as complicated as it should be. So yeah, don't worry about letting it cool and making a big mess. So yeah, that's pretty much round one of viewer Q&A. Hope that was fun for me. I do really enjoy getting the questions, so hopefully I've been able to answer them okay. And yeah, any questions, so there'll be some more videos that will have come out by the time you see this Q&A. And yeah, so please, any questions on any of that content, pop them down there and I'll be able to cover anything that comes up in another Q&A video in the future. So apart from that, stay low friction, and yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Oh yeah, by the way, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and other YouTubey type things, like share with your friends. So that'll keep you up to date with the latest low friction news and hints and tips. And yeah, also put any comments down below and I can try to look at those and take them into account for future episodes.